finish this project, and we're almost there. The couple things we want to do is when we go to edit, we want to actually see which athlete we're editing by having the information already in the input fields and then maybe putting the name here instead of the ID. So that's going to require an API call. We have our onSubmit handler, but we're also going to need to do something once the component actually is appearing. So let's get the athlete by sending in athlete set athlete. So let's send in an empty object to useState as the default. And then we'll have a useEffect call that's going to make a call to our database based off of the ID that's sent in props. So we're going to go to http://localhost 8000/API/athletes plus ID. Then, so once we get the response, we will set athlete to the response.data. And if there's an error, let's console.log the error. All right, so we need to do this. All right, so we're doing that, and we're going to set the athlete. Here, instead of we're editing athlete, let's say editing athlete.firstname, athlete.lastname. So we come back here, we see it takes a second to actually make a call to the API, but then it'll appear. All right? So now we want to figure out how to actually display that information in the form. We're going to have to pass this information down as a prop. However, we don't want to pass it down until our athlete's actually loaded. So there's a couple things we could do. One, we can create another call for a useState where we see if it's loaded or not. So it's initially going to be false, and then after we get this, we can set loaded to true. So what we're saying is it's going to be this loaded Boolean will be false, and then once we get the response, it'll end up resolving to true. So within here, I'm going to say loaded and the form. So the form will pop up once loaded is true. So as we can see, it all will be empty until we load it. All right, so now we're going to have to pass down the athlete's information. All right, so the way we can do that is by passing down some props that we'll then have to define or fix our form to be able to deal with. But we're going to pass down initial first name equal to athlete.firstname, initial last name to athlete.lastname, initial sport to athlete.sport, and initial team to athlete.team. So once we have that within our form, we can not only get the onSubmit handler, we can get the initial first name, initial last name, the initial sport, and the initial team. And we will actually initialize all of these to the initial first name, initial last name, initial sport, and initial team. All right. So what should happen here is once it's loaded, the form will show, and we know that the information will be there. So let's refresh. And it looks like it's not working right now. So let's try to figure out what's wrong. If we go back here, we have our first name, last name, sport, and team being sent down to our form, so that's fine. But we're never actually inputting the value, all right? We want to make the value by default equal to the first name, whatever's in state. And then value equals last name. Value equal sport. Value equal to team. So now if we come back, it'll take a second and now it auto-populates. So this is great, but we have to then fix it because in our create view, we're still using the form. So let's pass down our initial first name and we can just make these empty strings. Initial last name, initial sport, initial team. And the cool thing about this is if we wanted to, we could just put some filler information where we say like John Smith for the name. And if we go back and add athlete, it'll auto-populate. But if we don't want that, we can just get rid of it. And now we can say create a new athlete. All right? So let's go back to our delete button and figure out how we're actually going to do this. So whenever we have a delete button, we're going to have to pass down the ID in props to be able to figure out, hey, which athlete do we actually want to delete? So we're going to have some on-click for a button that's going to be on-click handler, or whatever you want to call it, and we're going to create that function right here. So now once we're in here, we can actually make a delete request. Just to be consistent, I'm going to make it lowercase. Delete http://localhost 8000 API/athletes/ID. Then we're going to get a response, and let's just console log the response. And then let's redirect them or navigate back to the root. And it looks like this is accidentally importing the response from Express. Oh, sorry, this should be a slash. Otherwise, we have an error. And let's just console log the error. So this should work, where we have this ID, we have our on-click handler, and then when we click the delete button, it'll send a delete request to this endpoint and should delete the athlete with that ID. So we notice that we have the delete button in our index view. If we want to, we can come over to our delete button, which is right here, and we're going to pass in the ID to athlete._ID. All right, we're going to pass that down so that the ID being passed down to our delete button corresponds to the athlete.ID. We also have the delete button on our detail. So we're going to do the same thing here, ID equals athlete._ID. Okay?